Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, August the 26th, 2024. So just to give you an idea about the structure of this video, I'm going to start by looking at the main astrological events in the week as I see it. And then I'm going to be looking again at RFK's chart, Robert Kennedy Jr.'s chart. Now, I looked at him yesterday in relationship to Kamala Harris. Now, today, in light of his endorsement of Trump, I want to look at his chart and Trump's chart to kind of see the connections between the two. And I also want to look again about this whole concept about predicting election results. I talked about it yesterday, and if you watch that video, I sort of rambled a bit about my thoughts about election results, and I kind of want to ramble again, and I want to have a look at a chart that I used to, I believe, successfully predict the 2020 election result, and also to discuss the problems I'm having with the 2024 election. So, at the end of this video, I'm going to look at the I Ching for the week ahead. So, astrology can give you lots of different views, and it's kind of difficult to put it together, but the I Ching gives you a more definite and single view that is independent of time zones. And my I Ching reading will be looking at a number of different areas. The main areas I'm going to look at are money, career, and relationships. But if you don't want to have your I Ching done, there is no obligation to look at that part of the video. Okay, so let's now look at what's happening this week. Just a reminder, if you happen to like this video, I would really appreciate it if you were to indicate that by pressing the like button. If you're not subscribed, I'd be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And I suppose if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Okay, so let's look at the week ahead. The week starting on Monday. So Monday the 26th. That is. So here's the chart, the starting position, and the first aspect we see is Mars biquintile Pluto. So here is Mars at 24 Gemini, and it's 144 degrees from Pluto. So 144 degrees, that is 2/5 of the circle. And Mars biquintile Pluto is about having a strong will. A will to make things happen, a will to create dramatic transformation. We have an idea about how we want to assert ourselves. It's in our head, and we can then use our willpower and our creativity to actually make it happen. Now, Mars quintile Pluto, it's not, I would have said, a particularly spontaneous aspect. In fact, it's a rather man-made aspect. So it may be that some of us are kind of thinking on Monday, I don't like the way the world is, and I want to do something. I want to make an impression. And rather than just act spontaneously, you just sort of think about it, and you think, how am I going to do this? And so you create a plan. You then execute that plan. And it might be a little bit contrived, but I think that it could be quite effective. So if you do feel at the beginning of a week that you must make an impact, then I suppose get it right. I suppose if you give it enough time and give it enough thought, maybe you can come up with something. Then on Tuesday, we have Venus trine Uranus. So Venus is at sort of 26 Virgo. Uranus is at 27. Venus will have moved on to around 27 Virgo, and it will maybe making a trine to Uranus. So Venus trine Uranus it can be quite a fun aspect. It might be a time when some of us want to do things differently, might want to present ourselves differently, might want to dress differently, might be attracted to unusual forms of art. In terms of relationships, there may be sudden events, sudden meetings, which might be exciting. They might be a little bit distressing, but I think the emphasis is going to be more on the excitement rather than distress. So don't make assumptions about other people and their behaviour and assumptions about where they're supposed to be. People can turn up in the strangest of places. Then on Wednesday, we have Venus continues moving through late Virgo, and very late Virgo, and Venus makes an opposition to Neptune. So Venus opposition Neptune, it could be a time when things start to get a little bit deceptive. We may make the wrong impressions. We may come to the wrong conclusions about certain people. And when it comes to money and details and things of a material nature, we might lose touch with reality and perhaps make mistakes. Though on the plus side, Venus opposition Neptune can be very artistic. So Neptune in Pisces can be about the imagination, everything that our imagination is producing, and Venus in Virgo is somehow able to use these inputs from the imagination and turn it into something real. So if you're an artist, this Venus opposition Neptune might actually be very useful. And there's something else happening on Wednesday, which is that would be Wednesday the 28th, 26th, 27th, yeah, that's right. And Mercury is coming to a standstill. Mercury goes stationary direct. And for many of us, that's going to be a big relief because, Mercury has been retrograde, and some of us might have been unsure about what to do. We might have had to go over old plans. Plans might not have worked out. There might have been delays, but now Mercury is going direct. We get a feeling that, things are moving again, and that there will be sort of greater clarity. And I think that overall that is fortunate. Thursday, Venus moves into Libra. Now that is a big change because, Venus in Virgo was in its fall. Venus in Libra is in its own sign. So that is really a big change. The condition of Venus dramatically improves. And it may be, that for many of us, we may think that we may be kind of relieved that August is coming to an end, that now things are starting to look better and feel better. And we may find that our taste improves, taste as in our aesthetic taste. And if we've been planning on perhaps buying clothes, for example, and we've been sensibly delaying because Venus was in Virgo in a bad position, then Venus in Libra might be a better time to do it. Though we don't want to go too far on this score because, Venus is starting to make a conjunction to the South Node. Now, that conjunction with the South Node is not an issue really until next week, but I'm not saying that we should automatically, the moment Venus moves into Libra, start splashing out on beautiful things. That might be an inappropriate response to this sign change, but it's got to be good that Venus is moving into Libra, all things being equal. It just makes things easier, and our sense of aesthetics is going to be better, and we could say that relationships are going to perhaps improve. And of course, if you are a Taurus or a Libra, then it's particularly good news because Venus is your ruler, and so Venus, your ruler, is moving into its own sign. So that's something to be welcomed. Then, right at the end of the week, Uranus goes stationary retrograde. and I think it goes stationary retrograde, I think at around 7 degrees, 27 degrees 15 Taurus, and that stationary retrograde is important. Uranus is a planet of change and turmoil and earthquakes, and of course it's close to Algol, still quite close to Algol, and so perhaps this is just a theory of mine, since that full moon on we had on August the 19th, in fact before that, I was getting a sense that just the astrology wasn't working, that something was holding things back, that things had quietened down in the Middle East, and there weren't demonstrations in Chicago, and as far as I can see, the Democratic National Convention went very well. I mean, I know that if you look at Fox News, they'll tell you what a disaster it was, and they'll talk about all the problems of the Democratic Convention and how it was all very sort of contrived and whatever. I mean, maybe they've got a point, maybe they haven't got a point, but I think from a neutral perspective, it seemed to go okay. So maybe with Uranus going Uranus going stationary retrograde and Mercury going direct, it may be that there could be a return to normality, that perhaps some of these things which just seem to stop working, that there seems to be this rather strange sense of quiet, and I'm wondering whether those two events could be disruptive. And I know we think of Mercury going retrograde, going stationary direct as normally being a time of normality, but maybe Mercury going stationary direct is going to sort of allow things to move, allow things to follow their natural course all over again. I mean, that is a possibility, but with Mercury going stationary direct, and Uranus going stationary retrograde, I will be covering those very big events in detail over the next week. So the big event on Friday was RFK dropping out of the race, and I think that's true. I think, to be precise, what he said he was doing is he's going to take his name off the swing states, the ballot in the states that matter, like Pennsylvania and Arizona, and he's going to keep his name on in solid red states and solid blue states. In other words, states where the Democrats are either definitely going to win or the Republicans are definitely going to win. So that is tantamount really to dropping out of a race, but he didn't quite describe it like that. And there may be some totally black swan event where you could have electoral college votes tied, in which case he might be able to become president according to his logic, but I think that's all pretty far-fetched. And so that's what he's done, and he has endorsed Trump, and he has actually been on the podium with Trump. And so the question is that a big deal from an astrological perspective? What does it actually mean? So here is RFK's chart. I don't have a time of birth for him, and it's a chart I've looked at before. It's not a chart that really chimes with me, and I think that's perhaps because I don't have a time of birth, just a date of birth. So, he's a Capricorn, and as I said, yes, he said when I was talking about Friday, he's got Neptune at 26 Libra, and 26 Libra is right opposition Kamala Harris's, right conjunct Kamala Harris's sun, and opposition her moon. Somehow his Neptune confuses Kamala Harris, or perhaps confuses her campaign. something about his generation. Now, Oprah Winfrey was actually born very close to RFK, so I suppose Oprah Winfrey will also have that Neptune. But maybe in her own way, people like in Oprah Winfrey can damage Kamala Harris's campaign. I think that too much celebrity can damage any campaign, can't it? I think it's one of the reasons Hillary lost in 2016. When it just becomes a rainbow coalition supported by Hollywood actors, it turns off a lot of people. And I suppose that's a danger that Harris has got. So his Neptune could be disruptive. And let's actually compare his chart with. Well, let's start by looking at his chart and the time he pulled out. So he pulled out. He pulled out in Phoenix, and as far as I know, that he pulled out at around 3:00. Well, no, this is New York time. But I think I've got it all works through. This is, I believe, the chart for when he said. So this is a chart for when he endorsed Trump, when he made those words. I may have got the timing wrong, but if I have got that wrong, I apologise. But what I think is important about this chart for when he endorsed two things are important about this moment when he endorsed Trump. Firstly, Saturn is at 17 Pisces, and so that Saturn was hitting his Jupiter. Let me just show you what that means. So if you look at RFK's chart and you see what was going on. So we have RFK's chart in the middle. I don't know what time he was born, and so Saturn at the time of him endorsing Trump was at 1711 Pisces. So he had Saturn exactly square his Jupiter. So RFK's Jupiter in Gemini, not a great Jupiter. Jupiter is in its detriment, it's retrograde, and so Saturn was hitting it. So Jupiter was RFK's, perhaps his ambitions, what he wanted to do, and perhaps ultimately it was his plans to be president, and Saturn hits his Jupiter, and that's sort of the symbolic end of it. Also note that it was RFK's Jupiter return. And Jupiter return, it happens every 12 years approximately, and so with a Jupiter return it kind of reminds him perhaps what his Jupiter is all about, and that Jupiter is in its detriment, and it is perhaps not able to pull everything together into a unified vision. That's a problem with Jupiter in Gemini. Jupiter in Gemini, the reason Jupiter in Gemini doesn't work is because Gemini is about small things. It's about, you look at this and you look at that. And I'm a Gemini, by the way, so I don't feel that I'm singling you out. If you're a Gemini, you focus on one thing and you focus on another thing. You focus on these little facts, little factoids, but bringing it all together into one big unified scheme is really difficult with Jupiter in Gemini. There's no vision. It's like the vision gets picked apart. And so that may be a problem with RFK. And if you are a Democrat and you think that RFK is out of order and worse, that Jupiter in Gemini would support that idea. He doesn't have a vision. He's going for one thing, he's going for another thing, and he's trying to put all these things together, like freedom and being an anti-vaxxer and his foreign policy and keeping America out of wars. And you might regard that as being a somewhat chaotic, cobbled together vision. I mean, I don't think it is. I think there is a certain coherence there. But one shouldn't see his Jupiter in Gemini as being necessarily particularly wonderful. And that Jupiter in Gemini has to work so hard in RFK's chart because it's his only non-discovered planet in an air sign. Sure, he's got Neptune in Libra, but it's a transpersonal planet. So that Jupiter is really having to work hard, and perhaps, with his Jupiter return and Saturn squaring his Jupiter, then perhaps it's not surprising that this was a moment when he finally decided that it was time to pull out. Now, assuming I've got the time right for that moment when he endorsed Trump, you'll see the midheaven at that time was 24 Leo, right on his Pluto. So that is perhaps rather significant. And look at the moon. I find the moon's position interesting. The moon at the time of his endorsement of Trump was at around 27 Aries. So that moon was, okay, it was opposition his Neptune, that's true, but it was also conjunct Kamala Harris's moon. It was on Kamala Harris's moon. It was kind of her lunar return. So Kamala Harris was kind of linked to that announcement in some way. And given the Neptune lineup, I suspect that was not a particularly fortunate thing for Kamala Harris to do. One other thing about RFK's Neptune being opposition Kamala Harris's moon and on Kamala Harris's full moon, apparently it has been said that RFK made offers to Trump and to Kamala Harris to meet, and Trump was very happy to meet RFK, but Kamala Harris refused to meet RFK, or probably it wasn't Kamala Harris, it was her handlers, but I think that is significant. Perhaps Kamala Harris doesn't really understand RFK, and her campaign doesn't really understand what he's about, and somehow feels threatened by it, and doesn't know how to relate to it, doesn't know how to talk to it, doesn't actually understand the constituency that RFK represents. And I think that could be quite fatal in terms of her campaign. Then we have to consider, how does RFK's chart relate to that of Donald Trump? So here is Donald Trump's chart. And so I just want to see whether RFK's chart is any good for Trump. Does it help? Of course, everyone on the left and the Democrats are sort of saying, suggesting it's going to be not necessarily be any good for Trump. A lot of people are saying that. Even I've read suggestions that it might be bad for Trump. But I do think the mainstream media are somewhat underestimating the importance of RFK endorsing him. And here is the two charts side by side. And what I find very interesting is that Trump has his Uranus at 1754 Gemini. And, normally, if you're just an ordinary person like me, for example, Uranus doesn't really matter that much. You can live without analysing your Uranus, and you don't necessarily live out your Uranus. It's not really a personal planet. But if you're someone collective like Trump, and as a public figure, like any public figure, one shouldn't necessarily regard any public figure, whether it's Trump or Kamala Harris, as a human being. I do make this point. I understand they are human beings, but as public figures, they're not human beings. Not really. They're not human beings with free will. They are instruments of the cosmos. The universe has plans. Like with Trump. Why didn't Trump die on July the 13th? Why did he move that head? It's because the universe wanted him alive. at that particular time. If the universe had wanted him dead, he would have turned his head, and he would have not turned his head, and he would have died. He's alive for a reason. Just remember that. And so Trump's Uranus, I think we can kind of see it as a personal planet, even though, of course, it's not a personal planet, but as a collective person, as an instrument of the cosmos, that Uranus is very real. And Trump has had Saturn square his Uranus. Saturn in Pisces, transiting Saturn in Pisces, has been square as Uranus, and it's been, I think, quite difficult for him. I think that his campaign has had difficulties over the last couple of weeks. In fact, I did a video quite recently when I suggested that maybe his campaign had been in trouble, and I got a lot of hostile comments from Trump supporters on my YouTube channel. I mean, I wasn't really trying to be hostile towards Trump. I wasn't trying to be too positive to him either, but I think his campaign has had a wobble. Perhaps with RFK's endorsement, maybe this bad patch is perhaps over. I don't know. I think that is possible. But the point is, it was all about Saturn square his Uranus, him as a disruptor, him as someone who can get attention. Saturn was square that Uranus, and it wasn't working very well. And RFK's Jupiter is at 1721 Gemini. So RFK's Jupiter is on Trump's Uranus. So I think we can see that absolutely at that event. Was it Glendale, Arizona, where RFK appeared on stage with Trump, gave a speech supporting Trump? That's Jupiter conjunct Uranus. There's where we're seeing Jupiter on Trump's Uranus, and livening things up, giving Trump's campaign the boost it needs at really a very good time, just a moment after the Democratic National Convention had finished. And again, that configuration, that synastry between Trump and RFK, where Jupiter's at 17 Gemini, was being triggered by Saturn. So it was almost like both men in their own way were feeling the negative effects of Saturn. Trump had a bad patch through in his campaign. I think he had. Kennedy was approaching the stage where he was effectively pulling out of his campaign. And so it all came together, perhaps, at that Trump meeting in Glendale, Arizona, where JFK appeared. Additionally, Trump has his midheaven at 24 Taurus. 24 Taurus is very much sort of where he's going, where his destination is, and Kennedy has a Venus North Node conjunction at 24 Taurus, and he also has a Sun at 27 Capricorn and Mercury at 28 Capricorn. Look at this conjunction in RFK's chart. You can even throw Chiron in if you want at 22 Capricorn, but North Node, Venus, Sun, Mercury, and perhaps Chiron, all making a trine to Trump's midheaven. That suggests to me that RFK coming on board, or at least endorsing Trump, is a major plus. I think Trump is going to gain votes. I think that he's going to, states are going to go his way that would otherwise have gone Harris's way. And I think we can see that in the chart. So yes, I would very much see this as a plus. But where does this leave us in terms of predicting the result of the election? So I talked about this yesterday, and when I was doing the forecast for Friday. But here's a problem about there are a number of problems about using astrology. to predict an election result. Firstly, if it is true that an election can be predicted on the basis of an individual horoscope, just imagine the chaos. Imagine what would happen if it was widely known that candidates with good charts, with good transits, are a lot more likely to win. It would be a nightmare, because candidates would be increasingly chosen on the basis of their horoscopes. I mean, it could happen, and so there would be, the Democrats and the Republicans would be vying to find the candidate who had the best chart. And can you imagine that would really work? I don't think it would work. So I'm not convinced that you can just look at a candidate's chart and just say, oh, they're going to win because they've got a good chart. Okay, Obama in 2008, his chart was absolutely fantastic. I suppose one could see it both, particularly in his Vedic chart, but still, I do have problems with it. Okay, but even if you can predict whether or not, in theory, if you can predict whether or not a candidate is going to win based on their chart, then you've got an additional problem, a separate problem. You look at all of these different predictive events. You've got predictive methods. You've got solar returns. You've got Vedic astrology. You've got the Vimshottari Dasha system. You've got transits. You've got progressions. You've got lunar returns. And so you just end up just getting more and more data. You start looking at other things. You look at inauguration charts. You look at charts for when someone accepted the nomination. For example, you could throw in Kamala Harris's chart when she accepted the nomination. The chart for when she accepted the nomination. So you just get loads and loads of information. And how do you sort it out? In the end, you have to use judgment. But judgment is often going to be prejudice in the end. You're just going to get a feeling about who is going to win. Now, 2020 was easy. I knew that Trump was going to lose in May 2000, and the election was in November. I was 100% sure that Trump was going to lose in May. In like 6 months before the election. I even wrote on my blog, I said, Trump is going to, I can call this election for Biden. It was totally obvious. And the reason it was totally obvious was essentially because I was lucky. And I was lucky because I did a horary chart, which was totally clear. And I know some people say, oh, well, you can't do horary charts. But if everyone does a horary chart, you get lots and lots of different horary charts. I would reply to that, well, I take horary astrology seriously. I've done a course in horary astrology. It's I did Olivia Barclay's what her qualified horary practitioner course. I did it. I mean, I think I know vaguely what I'm talking about with horary, and I think a good. I don't care. My charts are going to be right if they give the right message. And here's the chart. So I asked the question: Is Donald Trump going to win in November? And I asked this, November 2020. I was looking at the 2020 election here. And it was an easy chart because who's Trump? Remember, Trump was president at the time. We've got Cancer on the midheaven. So the ruler of the midheaven is the moon. So Trump is moon in Scorpio. Moon is going to an opposition of the sun in 6.5 degrees. 6.5 degrees. So you go May, June, July, August, September, October. It's about 6 months before the election. So I didn't have to analyze this chart. I didn't have to spend any time on it. I was just really lucky that I got a chart that allowed me to cut through everything and just say Trump's going to lose. I didn't have to worry about solar returns, anything. I remember I wrote articles I made comments on Reddit at the time, the Astrology Reddit, saying that Trump's going to lose. People just didn't believe me. I mean, I know that in reality there was probably a 50-50. It was a 50-50 thing. So I'm not saying that this is so spectacular, predicting that Trump was going to win in 2020. But I was sure. I was 100% sure when the first results came in November 2020, suggesting that Trump was going to win. I was totally gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it. I went to bed feeling really just gutted that my system had failed. How could that possibly be? And I woke up, and of course, as it happened, Trump had won. Now, this election is really different. It's completely different. And as I was saying yesterday, and I just do want to ramble a bit more about it. And I've really looked at a lot of stuff with this election. I've looked at return charts, I've looked at transits, I've looked at Vedic astrology. I know I've looked at what some other astrologers have said as well. I try to avoid doing that because I kind of don't want to cloud my judgment even more, clouded than it actually is. But if I were to make a judgment based just on the astrology, now hear me out here. If I were to make, I have to be very careful what I say. If I were to make a judgment based just on the astrology, and I were to say, where does it tilt? Looking at everything, I would have said the astrology is tilting towards Kamala Harris. That's the first point to make. However, it's not just about the astrology. It's also about, I suppose, what you feel, and also one's observations about people's behavior. I think that when Biden was inaugurated in 2021, I think that at that stage, Biden's victory in 2024 was inevitable. He'd run for a second term. It was inevitable that he was going to win. And you just let the whole thing run naturally. That's the whole way. It should have just been run naturally. It's kind of the same way that, in 1972, beginning of 1972, it was inevitable that Nixon won the 1972 election, I suppose. And it was kind of inevitable that, there was really that Nixon was going to perhaps go down as a great president. There was nothing that had to be forced. But sometimes when you force things, you mess with fate, don't you? And it's like with the Watergate break-in in 1972, completely unnecessary. Watergate break-in was to put down sort of phone taps and to photograph documents, and the Republicans and Nixon were in a great position, as the results of the 72 election showed. Yet it was all about power. They felt they had to kind of push it, and when you kind of push it, you sort of mess with your luck. I think that is actually how it works. And, going back, and I think that you kind of have a similar situation going on here with the Democrats. They pushed it, and I think that the Democrats, they messed with fate, if you like, by attacking Trump in the way they attacked him. You see, I know that Americans can be very legalistic. Yet they feel, well, if someone's committed a crime, that it's very important that you follow it through. Well, not necessarily. One has to remember that Gerald Ford did pardon Nixon, and I think the reason Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon was not necessarily about Nixon. Okay, he had perhaps a loyalty to Nixon, but it was perhaps about the dignity of the position. Perhaps that was what it was about. It was kind of good for the functioning of American democracy and its structure and its hierarchy. if you just pardon him. And that was probably the right thing to do. Of course, a lot of people were very upset when Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon. And it was a kind of a similar position with Trump. With Trump is like, have you seen that film Predator? So Predator was, with Predator, represents this alien life form that feeds on violence. So whenever this predator, this alien life form feels violence, it is kind of attracted to it. And I mean, in a way, Trump is like Predator. He is some kind of life form that feeds on publicity. Just any publicity. And when you take away that publicity, or sort of the oxygen of publicity, as Margaret Thatcher used to say when talking about, I think, banning sort of reporting of the IRA. So when you take away the oxygen of publicity, when you just ignore him, then he just fades away. He just dies. He shrivels. He goes away. But he is this life form that does thrive on publicity, and it's almost like the Democrats were in a sort of no-win situation. They didn't have the maturity to recognise that he's someone who thrived on publicity, and so perhaps they felt they had to push it. They had to push him through the courts, or okay, it wasn't the Democrats, but really it was district attorneys who supported the Democrats. It was judges who were registered Democrats. That's how it worked, and that's how it came over to many sections of the American public. And so Trump was made alive by all of this publicity, and it's like, I think that in a way the Democrats were. It may have been, of course, that at some level they were in an impossible position because the Democrats kind of knew. It's almost like they knew he was going to win in 2024. They just knew it, and so because they knew he was going to win in 2024, then they felt they had to attack this person who they knew he was going to win. And so if they were sure he wasn't going to win, they weren't going to attack him. So they were in this incredibly contradictory position. It was a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if they had, as I said, if Biden had pardoned Trump in the same way that Gerald Ford had pardoned Nixon, I think that would have destroyed Trump. Okay, there would have still been the state prosecutions against him, but I'm sure Biden and friends could have swung it and persuaded people to just back off those prosecutions, and he would have just disappeared. But so you see the sort of the contradiction there, and I think that the whole flow of American politics was disrupted further by the Democrats. If you look at the cycle of elections of presidents who are elected in years ending in 0, their regime, they always get re-elected, and so that was a wonderful cycle. Biden was elected in 2020, year ending in 0. He would have been re-elected in the following cycle in 2020, in 2024. And if you go back in American history, that's always the case, unless the sitting president at the end of that, unless the sitting president changes. So if you alter it, so if you have a president at the end of a term who doesn't stand in the next term of the same party, then they lose. And that's only happened twice before, in 1840 and 1880. And so the Democrats, by being obsessed with power, feeling they had to push out Biden, in a sense, lost the election. You see, I feel that if Biden had have remained in place, that Biden would have probably won in 2024. I know that's not what everyone says. The polls are saying something differently. But I think that the Democrats kind of disrupted the cycle. And through their behavior, through their kind of their knowledge that they were going to lose. But of course, if they had ignored that knowledge and had ignored Trump, then they could have won, but they just couldn't help themselves. So I think that fate was sort of playing itself out there. And of course, you've got the RF Kennedy thing. Again, this attacking of RF Kennedy. I just saw an article a couple of days ago. Immediately he has the endorsement. I see an article saying that, RF Kennedy was my drug dealer. I saw that article. And it's like they can't cope, and their ability to be in, they're so obsessed with being in power and staying in power that I think they're going to lose power. And there's a kind of broader karma. It's not about what you believe in. And if they had treated Kennedy better, Kennedy, I don't think, would be endorsing Trump. So you have to look at this crazy behavior by the Democrats. Isn't it said that those the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad? And I think that that's actually what's happened with the Democrats, that they could have won. They were set up to win. In the moment Biden got elected, he was going to get re-elected. All they had to do was ignore Trump and not empower him. But they had to do the very things that were in the end going to destroy them. And I suppose that's where we see with the astrology, the natural course. The astrology is demonstrating that the natural course, the natural thing to happen is for the Democrats to get re-elected this year, for the Democrats to win in 2024. That's what the astrology is suggesting. But when you look at their behavior and you try to look at it in terms of perhaps karma and the collective unconscious and a group starting to behave in a crazy way, you see, and you also in astrology, once you see a cycle start to work, the cycle breaks. And I'm just thinking that this year is going to be the year that when the Jupiter-Saturn cycle breaks, when I think Trump's going to win. And I don't say that on the basis of astrology. If I was doing it on pure astrology, I would said the Democrats are going to win. But I suppose, being an astrologer, I'm interested in the collective unconscious. I have to consider the collective unconscious. I can see evidence of the collective unconscious working in terms of the Democrats. And when I throw that in as well, that makes me think and perhaps forecast that, that Trump's going to win in November. I think Trump's going to win in November. The astrology is not fully suggesting that. The astrology on its own is suggesting that possibly Kamala's going to win. I think Biden would have definitely won if he'd been on the ticket. But I think that the Democrats have just tried too hard. They've tried to play too many games. And I think that there's a kind of a disturbance in the collective unconscious. And I think that's my view on the matter. It's not comfortable. And I just would be so nice if I could just get a clean horary chart. Never got one. So that's my view on the election, and I'm really sorry to have rambled for so long. Okay, so let me turn to the I Ching. So I am now going to look at what's happening over the week. And if you don't want your I Ching to be read, you don't have to have it read. You can just stop watching the video. This I Ching only applies to people watching this video. If you're not watching this video, the I Ching, or the I Ching section of this video, it doesn't really apply to you. Okay, so the question I asked was this. What is the week starting on August the 26th going to be like for those watching this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 51. So just a reminder, I'm going to be doing sort of 4 passes on this I Ching. I'm going to do sort of a general interpretation, then I'm going to look at money, then I'm going to look at career and business, and finally relationships. So, general reading for this is, the first hexagram is thunderbolts. At least that's what Greg Winkup calls this hexagram. The Wilhelm translation calls it the arousing, but I think thunderbolt is clearer. It's about a surprise event, something happening that we simply were not expecting, we hadn't planned for. And as a result of this, we may be in a sense of shock, and we may feel that it's a situation that is completely disastrous. That may be our first impression. But, we have got 3 moving lines, the second, the third, and the fifth. And the second line is about losing something, but not panicking. So we feel we've lost something, we feel there is a big loss, but actually we'll get it back. We shouldn't panic. So if something goes wrong at the beginning of a week, it's not necessarily the end of the world. So we'll be able to get through it, and it's just so important, not to panic. And then we get the third line moving and the fifth line moving, and it's a similar picture. Things are difficult and shocking, and we might feel that it's really, really hopeless and that fate has suddenly gone against us. But again, there's no need to panic. Part of the message of this hexagram 51 thunderbolt, or part of the imagery of this hexagram, is the offering of incense. People are making an offering, and there's this earthquake, thunder, but we don't drop the offering. We are able to keep our composure, and we can maintain our rituals. We can continue to function. And then the fifth line moves, and with the fifth line, it may be a time when we have to look at the situation and say, well, we need to move. It's not the end of the world, but this is a bad situation that we're in. I don't know what this is talking about. It could be talking about something you're involved in which is not going to plan. You're considering persisting with it, but you get a chance to quit, to leave before it's too late. And that takes us to the second hexagram, and the second hexagram is hexagram 43, which again is called flight. Winkup translates it as flight. The Wilhelm translation calls it the breakthrough, but I think flight is perhaps more appropriate. It's just about a situation which is not working, and we can see that danger is really very close. But don't worry, it's not too late. We have a chance to escape. And so, in terms of money, it could be a somewhat difficult situation over the week. We are very aware of financial dangers, and there may be events this week that do have an impact on our finances, that could actually have a very negative impact. And at least that's how it feels. Perhaps we're looking at the economy, or we're getting perhaps news over the week which financially seems somewhat disturbing. But the key point is not to panic. And there may be a sense financially that we feel that we've lost something, that perhaps some money is owed to us, or we're not going to get some money back, or we've made a financial mistake, or I don't know what can be. Maybe we wanted to return something to Amazon, we've missed a deadline or something like that. But it does say that we will get that money back. Talk to Amazon and they'll probably agree to extend the deadline, for example. But if you do feel a sense that money has been lost, it's important not to panic, because there is a way for that money to return. And that money may actually return of its own accord. We may not have to do anything, but that doesn't mean we should be lazy. There's no harm in making phone calls just to make sure that money is on its way. And as the week progresses, we may be involved, some of us may be involved in a financial situation that we're not comfortable with. It's really quite difficult, and we're afraid that it might lead to some kind of financial loss. And in the end, we have this fifth hexagram. We're saying this is a situation we need to get out of, and we do have an opportunity to get out of it. So if you're sinking into a situation where you've made commitments, you feel you're going to have to pay money to someone or some organization over a long period of time, and you're getting really nervous about it, there is an opportunity to get out of it. That maybe you have to break a promise, change your mind on a contract, or just maybe change your mind in terms of what you were planning on doing. Maybe you were planning on making some kind of financial mistake and you were sort of committed to it, or other people were pushing you into it, and then there's a moment where you just say, no, you don't want to do it. And of course, this hexagram, it moves to hexagram 43, which is absolute flight. So it's a time when you can escape and potentially save yourself a lot of money by just realizing that something is going nowhere and taking appropriate action. From a career and business point of view, I don't think you can expect it to be an especially stable week. If you look at what's happening in your job, if you have a job or you're in your business, it doesn't seem great. And there may be, it may seem fine to begin with, but there may just be events which are quite disturbing, which really do disturb you, and you're not quite sure what to make of them. And you're not quite sure what to make of them, and there may be a sense of panic, and you may feel that you've perhaps lost something or perhaps compromised yourself. So perhaps something will happen at work that you weren't expecting, and you feel that it's put you in a bad position. And maybe you've lost credibility. Maybe you've made a mistake. Maybe you are being accused of making a mistake, or you think you're going to be accused of making a mistake. But the key point is not to panic, because if you feel that something's gone wrong, it will return to normal. That is certainly true. But so no need for too much worry. But you may still be getting yourself into a situation deeper and deeper, and maybe you've started to make a commitment. Perhaps if you have a business, your business is moving in a particular direction. Or perhaps you've decided to take on a particular client who is difficult, and it's really not going well. You can just see the possibilities for disaster building up, and then you decide that's it, you want to go, you've had enough. Now, in certain situations, probably very rare situations, it may be that you're in a job that is, you have a line of work, a piece of work or a job that there's a shock, and you can see that it's going nowhere, and that may be a case to leave a job or to give up a piece of work because you see that things are going from bad to worse. So that is certainly a possibility. And of course, this hexagram 51, it does move to hexagram 43, which is flight. So there is a sense here that you're escaping from something in career and business. Something is not working, you've had a shock, and you need to get out. You need to quit very quickly. So again, I'm not necessarily suggesting that you should leave your job if you have a job, but perhaps you should decline a responsibility. You've taken on something and you realize it's not working, and you perhaps say, well, this isn't working, or perhaps you suggest to someone that we need to stop expanding in this particular direction because it's not going to happen. We need to stop pursuing this thing because if we continue with it, we may be heading for disaster. And I suppose if you're looking for a job, there may be a few rebuffs. You may start to feel that things are not working. You may have some shocks, but it's important to be shock-proof here. So, for example, don't be upset by rejection. Don't be shocked by rejection. And it is only a temporary situation, but maybe that if you're looking for a job and you're perhaps desperate for a job, you might start to do something and you might go for the first thing that comes your way, but that might not be appropriate at the moment. So it's just would be very important to keep your cool. Remember, this is a hexagram just for this week, and end of August, beginning of September, maybe it's just a time when ideally nothing much should be happening, but it is happening. I think there is a sense of surprise, and perhaps unpleasant surprise, but I think we can handle it. And finally, there is relationships. And with this hexagram 51 thunderbolts, I think it may be a week where you start to understand the nature of a relationship, or perhaps you understand the nature of a particular person, and it may be quite shocking. Perhaps you will see someone's behavior and you will realize that this person is kind of no good for you, and if you persist with this relationship, it could damage you. On the other hand, that first hexagram is that first line in Thunderbolts is talking about getting something back. So there is a possibility that right at the beginning of a week there's a sense in which a relationship has been lost. That might be a feeling. I mean, not necessarily a romantic relationship, but just some relationship you regard as being important. You may feel that something is lost. Maybe you've been upset with someone's been upset with you, and they're not talking to you or whatever. In that case, there is a promise that things will return to normal. So if you start the week thinking you've lost contact with someone forever, or someone's not going to forgive you, don't panic. Things will return to normal. But particularly if you're in a new relationship, or a fairly new relationship, again, whatever the nature of a relationship, there's just a feeling that you're seeing new sides to someone's personality, and you're not too comfortable with it, and you're seeing someone for what they really are. And it may reach a stage when you realize that someone is no good for you, and that's sort of the fifth line from the top, is talking about flight, having to escape before something bad happens. And hence, with this hexagram thunderbolt, it does move to flight, and there is a sense of escaping from something before it's too late. Now, of course, if you've been in a relationship for decades, that is not really an appropriate interpretation of it. And I think it's more about a relationship that is short, but has not been around for very long. I mean, it could be, a new business partnership. It could be a romantic relationship, but someone new. It could be a financial relationship. But whatever it is, I think there's just going to be a sense that if you feel that things are going wrong, obviously if you don't feel that anything's going wrong, maybe there's nothing to worry about. But if you feel that things are going wrong, and you can see someone's behavior, you can see your behavior, you have a bad feeling about it, then perhaps it really is time to quit. And there is the opportunity to leave. So if you want to break a relationship, if you're in a relationship and you want to break up with someone, then this week may be the time to do it. because there's a clear pathway to do it. There's a clear sense in which you can break out. Now's the time. You can hear the warning signs, and you can feel the warning signs, and now is the time to perhaps make your move and head for the exit. And that's it for the week. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you like this video. My apologies for rambling a little bit about politics and the collective unconsciousness. Like on Friday, I went on for too long, but hopefully you were able to sort of bear with me, or maybe you would skip what I said because I was getting too boring. But anyway, if you happen to like this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, of course, be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.